Alrighty, back at it again. I found a chunk of fuel line here. I don't really like this small fuel line. It's one that's been off another saw. So I'll probably just go with it. It's not my saw. And gonna take the carburetor off, take the float bowl off, check it out, take the jets out, clean them. I'd like to just remove the float bowl screws, but there's 4 of them, and one is buried right up underneath the handle. So I think I'll just undo it right here at the motor, right at the reed plate, and go from there. Anyway, as soon as I get the carb popped off, I'll be back with you. Okay, just wanted to show something. This is the reed plate. If you took it off, you can see these 4 pieces in here. They're the reed valves. The reed valve's got to close up and seal so that when it's going up on compression stroke, it doesn't blow the fuel back out the carb. It's always a good idea to check to make sure you can pull the reed plate off, shine a light in to see if anything's coming through, put a little puddle of penetrating oil or whatever, look for leaks on it. So if they do, they'll blow the fuel right back out the carb. And most reed plates, you can undo them and literally flip the reed over to get it to seal if it's hanging open. Anyway, it's just something you should check on all of these 2 strokes. Anyway, in a second here, I got the carb off, we're going to open it up. I'll be right back. Alright, so what I like to do is this is a high-speed jet on the front. I like to turn them in and count the turns. So this one's 1.5. I'm going to back out this jam nut. I'm going to completely turn the high-speed jet out. So high-speed jet goes in through the float bowl, and I'll show you when I open up. There's a spot it closes up to adjust the fuel. I'm going to take this air filter cover off, get it out of our way. The jet's going through it. Be careful. I always, like I say, spin them in. I always spin this high-speed jet in. Just spin it in real easy, because when you bottom it out, you don't want to put a burr on this. It'll screw it right up. So I see somebody over time's used a finishing nail for the choke lever. That's alright, it's not going to hurt nothing. We can still flip it. This here is a low speed jet. It should be somewhere around a half a turn. We'll check it. It's about a quarter. So wind it right out for cleaning. And again, don't crank it right down in. This is another jet that goes through the carburetor. It's always good to take it out so you can clean it. I usually clean these out with a welding tip cleaner, blow air through them. See, there's a little hole in the side. You got to make sure all these passageways are clean. Then I'll go to the bottom side of the carb. There's 4 screws. I'll loosen them all off. Before I pop it right off, they got a cork gasket holding, like sealing the float bowl to the carburetor. I just like to give it a little tap like that. Try and break it loose without destroying the float bowl gasket. You can make them out of cork. I found the odd one on eBay, but it's a lot of work cutting them out of cork. It's not the nicest to cut them out of. It's getting hard to find cork, especially the right thickness. You just tap them like that, a lot of times they'll break free, and there's their gasket. Good and clean. Right there, that little hole, that's where your high-speed jet goes into. Right there. This screw here is where this jet goes into. So take that out, make sure the passageway all the way through is clean. And then I'll clean everything out with my welding tip cleaner, and I'll blow it out with air, and then we'll put it back on. Anyway, I'll do that and I'll get back to you. Oh, One other thing I should mention, the floats should always be checked. I like to pull them out, and if you know there's been fuel in it, I like to just, if there's been fuel in the float bowl recently, just take the float out, shake it, and listen. When they get a hole in them, they'll soak up fuel, and you can hear it sloshing around. In this case, it hasn't been in an engine in a long time. So what I'll do is I'll take this screw out here, take the float out, and I'll submerge it in some water. And I'll push it down in and see if any air bubbles come out. If any air bubbles come out, then the float has got a hole in it, it's no good and needs to be replaced. Just something you should check while you got it apart. Alright, I got the carb all apart, cleaned. These are the welding tip cleaners I was telling you about. There's a hole in the side of the jet. You got to really watch for stuff like that. And I just like to go down through here, out the side, then I blow them out. These you can get in pretty much any auto store. They're just welding tip cleaners. They work great for cleaning out carb jets. So got my thing of water. I'm going to check my float. I clean the worst of the debris off it. When you take something like this apart, get all the corrosion and stuff off of it. You don't want any of the corrosion floating around in the carburetor. Make sure it's all good and clean. So I'm going to push the float down in. Watching, making sure there's no air bubbles. Like I say, make sure the carb is good and clean. You don't want debris floating around in there, plugging up jets. So good, I don't see any air bubbles coming out. If air bubbles coming out, obviously the float would be no good. So wipe that off in a minute. These carburetors, the low speed jet on these are different than your diaphragm carburetors of today's chainsaws and that. When you wind the low speed jet in, you're restricting the air, making it draw more fuel. So it richens it. The high speed jet, when you open it up, draws more fuel. When you close it up, it gets less fuel. Today's modern carburetors with diaphragms, you close the low speed jet, you're starving it for fuel. It's just opposite to these, so you got to remember stuff like that. When I put the float back in, this little tab grabs the needle that closes off your fuel, like the needle in the seat. You got to make sure the float when it's in is level when it's up. And anyway, I'll put this all back together and get back to you. Just wanted to show you, not sure if it'll show on the camera. Right in there is a needle valve. You can just see it. That tab will catch on it. We'll slide it down in there. Unfortunately, you probably can't see it. The screw goes through the side for the float. Just wiggle it around. It just hinges on that screw. Put it in. There, it's in. Now when you turn this upside down, yeah, you want that float to sit nice and flush, like it's hard to show it on this camera. It's sitting flush with the bottom of the bowl. You can also, you want to blow into this, the inlet, to make sure that the float is sealing. Just thought I'd share that with you. Should have turned the camera on a second ago. So I always clean out the gas tank, like blow it out with air. You'd be surprised what old fuel does. Don't know if the camera's picking it up, but there's dust coming out like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, the carb's all back together. We'll have to wait for a little nicer day. It's nothing but mud out there. It's been raining. We still got a fair bit of snow, but all in front where I like to start stuff up is nothing but water and mud. And we'll keep using the coffee cup from my wife. We won't tell her we're sticking carb parts in it. I'll wash it up, say nothing. Anyway, see you on the next one. This is part 2. Part 3, hopefully it'll start up if the seals are good. You never know. If the seals are bad, it's not my saw, it's not worth putting in seals. It's just going to be a shelf piece for the guy. Anyway, talk to you later.